Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we're lifelong Catholics. And what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church. And we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to get into behind the scenes of the last little bit of the second session of Vatican II, and into the third session, how the CIA's main organization, Time Inc. International, began to really ratchet things up in the psychological warfare program. And we welcome Brother Alexis to the program.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV once again for this long series investigation into the doctrinal warfare program waged by the United States government against the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And we've covered lots of topics in that. The prime mover behind it, Henry Luce, the founder of Time Life magazine, who is a Skull and Bones Lodge member, and his chief agent, C.D. Jackson, and the organizations they founded. So C.D. Jackson was sent to Rome to undermine the council. And the council was organized to fail because if you allow the enemies into your consultation, they will insert falsehood and doctrine to take you down. And that was the exact target. That was the purpose of the CIA presence in Rome in 62 and 63 and 64. And the chief agent for that was C.D. Jackson. He was the life Rome bureau chief, as it were, assigned to this task.
Yep.
And so a letter between him and Henry Luce is going to be very revealing about what was really going on. And before we get into that, we want to remind you once again of this wonderful book that we're taking excerpts from that you need to have on your bookshelf if you are a Catholic from the United States or the English-speaking world, or anywhere if you're a Catholic historian. It's entitled John Courtney Murray, Time Life and the American Proposition, and a link, and it's subtitled
How the CIA's Doctrinal Warfare Program Changed the Catholic Church by David A. Wimhoff, lawyer in South Bend, Indiana, and law professor at the University of Notre Dame.
And if you want a copy of this book, there's a link in the show notes of this program. This is a wonderful book. I already had asked my benefactors to get me 4 copies. And so it's going fast and it won't last with the publicity we're getting on this program. So this book is packed with information and documents. And AJ, what is this letter between C.D. Jackson and Henry Luce from April 22nd, 1960, what is it, 2 or 3?
The 64.
Oh, 64.
So in a letter to Luce, who was residing mostly in his Phoenix, Arizona home, CD mentioned the Pro Deo project was no longer a high priority. The Catholics led by J. Peter Grace were supposed to be raising funds for Morleon, but that never really seemed to work out. CD remarked how things were changing. The American Jewish Committee, the only one of the 3 religious groups that has a real axe to grind, is becoming more and more conspiratorial. I suspect is maneuvering for a near total takeover. What will probably happen is the grandiose schemes will fade away and the American Committee will kick along very much reduced steam, conceivably with an annual budget as low as $15,000 or $20,000. Under the chairmanship of some fat cat from the AJC, which will underwrite occasional projects in return for an occasional rewrite of history by the Curia.
So just as a little historical note, $15,000 in 1964 would be equivalent to about $200,000 today. So that's not a small budget unless you come from a big organization. But here we see revealed the names of the 2 groups that are being used to destroy the church: Pro Deo and the American Jewish Council. And Pro Deo was a CIA front to make it appear to be an organization out to help Catholics, but was out to destroy Catholics. And they were influential in opening business schools in Peru, Costa Rica, Guatemala, under the auspices of the Jesuits. And then slowly the Jesuits are turned into communist sympathizers, agents to bring down those countries. And the American Jewish Council, well, they were just rabidly pro-Jewish, and their objective was to get Catholics to deny a teaching that is found in the Torah, namely Moses said, there will come a prophet greater than me. And if you don't accept him, you're going to be cut off from God's people. And that is the Catholic Christian teaching. We've always had that. Christ is the Messiah. If you don't accept him, you can't be saved, whether you're a Jew or a Gentile. And if we were to reject that, we would be rejecting a Torah teaching, which has always been a revealed truth of God. So they're the players, and Jackson admits they're there and that they're out to do the work. So this is not some, crazy person thinking it up. Here's a document that states this is what was going on. Yeah. So when you wonder why these strange things happen, you know it. So what more does Wim Hof tell us about these plots?
Well, instructing at Prodeo and shaping the curricula, there were Professor Charles Detcher, a research analysis for the U.S. Army. For Johns Hopkins University, a professor at the Catholic University of America, Peter Drucker. Eli Ginsberg, Columbia. C. Hildebrand, University of California. And from Harvard, O. Williams. Guest lecturers were always welcome. Morleon asked Lewis and C.D. Jackson to lecture at Prodeo campuses in Europe about leadership. Then it was in John. The effort was helped by the ascension of John the 23rd to the papacy. CD wrote that the new regime convinced that the sociological activity and identification must parallel its efforts to save souls, and so was approving of Prodeo and its phenomenal growth in the late 1950s to include about 1,800 students from 30 plus countries. These important goals were reached regarding Prodeo's legitimacy and accreditation. These were in agreement with the Italian government to recognize Prodeo under Italian civil law, in accommodation with the church under canon law, so as not to be found in violation of the church tradition, and with the Vatican state that to legitimize Prodeo's international activities, Booth's resignation would not stop Morleon's project. Then Morleon wrote to Lewis saying, I have some interesting news. That Paul VI wants to make the international headquarters of Prodeo Rome.
So here you see how the infiltration program of the CIA was like perfectly achieved its goals. And Prodeo, you could say, was a Gladio operation, but at the ecclesiastic level, to pretend to be a church organization, but really to control Catholics. Like we have pointed out in past programs, a lot of these so-called tradi groups who are founded by the CIA, like Christendom College. Mm-hmm. They're not what they appear to be, and their graduates end up thinking along Masonic categories and never change that, because whether they were brainwashed at their institution or they were recruited as government agents, who can say, but the result is the same.
Yeah, then we go into the time, the attacks by time.
So time actually had an agenda point to attack, because in a doctrinal or psychological warfare against your enemy, you want him to lose the will to fight and lose the ability to command. And in a doctrinal warfare program against the Catholic Church, it was to attack doctrine and hierarchical organization. And the CIA was I would say maybe 80% effective on the doctrinal aspect and the documents, but they were 100% effective on the changing organization, because the hierarchy after Vatican II pursues the globalist agenda 100%, and they're constantly persecuting Catholics from then on to this very day. And we see the fruit of that when Catholic bishops around the world are now insisting their priests get the vaccine, even though information is coming out saying that is unhealthy. Yeah. So it's an entire program. And so let's hear some of the points that Time Life had to undermine the Catholic Church.
Time continued to target those who objected to the American and Americanist agenda, and continued to praise those who were willing to advance it. Deemed a conservative, Los Angeles James Francis Cardinal McNair was attacked in the pages of Time. McNair was one of the few cardinals who criticized the change of the liturgy at the Mass. He also criticized the techniques of form of criticism devised by the German Protestant theologians, which many Catholic Bible scholars implemented. As an Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, the ascetic and humble McNair had doubled the size of his California flock in less than 15 years. But in doing so, ran afoul of the Americans, who viewed his resistance to racial politics as a problem. McNair denounced and helped defeat a California anti-discrimination law in 1947, insisting that there is no racial problem in Los Angeles. With that kind of a record, he was, as Time put it, a wide open target for critics both in and outside the church, and labeled as someone who had failed to seize the moral leadership that many of his flock had expected of him.
So here you hear this constantly nowadays, the media attacking traditionalists or people who are conservatives as racists. And we are presented with the false narrative today that criticism is coming from the left or Marxism. It's cultural Marxism, they say. No, it's a CIA doctrinal warfare tactic to undermine its opponents in society or in the Catholic Church. And I say CIA, you'd say Skull and Bones Lodge, Masonic Lodge. It's all one, because CIA is their tool of operation. So now you know where it's come from, and now you know where it was launched. It's not coming from the Democratic Party originally. It's coming from the US government. And that's how they attacked. That's an example of how they attack their enemies. How did they praise their allies?
Yeah. Time continued to praise those who opposed the church's teaching and who advanced the American agenda. Jesuit Archbishop Thomas D. Esther Roberts was a case in point. At 71, he was depicted as the independent spirit who feels free to put churchly propositions up to the measure of his own reason. He has no use for pomp. Time felt that Roberts had just the right amount of American irreverence when reported that he would discourage people from kissing his Episcopal ring by joking that I carry it in my back pocket. Even better, Roberts was in favor of changing church teaching on birth control to be in line with the Protestants, expediting marriage annulment procedures while supporting the ban the bomb movement and the bigger voice for the laity in the church affairs.
So this sounds like a Jesuit I think we all know. He's in Rome right now at the Vatican. And I'll just point out there's that comment about putting your Episcopal ring that people want to kiss in your back pocket couldn't possibly be a real statement, because you couldn't put a ring in your back pocket. Just doesn't work that way, unless you're trying to imply something favor sodomy or something. I don't know what that reference is. It's just totally off the wall. So there's this strategy, and you see this today. Priests like Ralph Martin are praised in the press to the skies, whereas cardinals like Burke are trashed to hell. And this is not coming from the left. This is coming from the Masonic lodges, the CIA, so you know, understand what their agenda is. And but they had doctrinal points too. They actually were out to destroy certain Catholic teachings. And what
Yeah.
does Wim Hof say about that?
Tam convincingly and powerfully promoted better relations between Catholics and Jews, depicting Cardinal Cushing of Boston as a hero of progress and leader of the forces. We have indicated that they will fight for a strong declaration on the Jews at the third session. The term strong declaration was Time's code word for the removal of the reference to conversion. That remained in the statement on anti-Semitism as it stood after the second session. Seeking conversion was bad for it would foster reciprocal distrust as well as bitterness and resentment, said Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan and a good friend of Cardinal Bea, raising the specter of the last war and the emotional bid to force the Catholics to change the draft statement. The article quoted the rabbi who said, as I have repeatedly stated to leading personalities of the Vatican, I am ready to go to Auschwitz anytime if faced with the alternative of conversion or death.
So that is a really nasty statement claiming that Catholics are behind the Holocaust or the killing of Jews in concentration camps. It's an absolutely vicious statement and exaggeration. And, that you'll be damned to hell for all eternity for not accepting Messiah is a teaching of Moses, who was a Jew. So, no matter who, even if you were to get the Catholic Church to change its doctrine, which you can't because the church will never change your doctrine, you still couldn't change Moses' doctrine. It's written in the Torah. So that shows you kind of the manipulations that were going on. And we can only imagine what C.D. Jackson meant, what they were going for a kill and for a total takeover. And a lot of authors since the council have argued that the doctrine in Nostra Aetate is entirely un-Catholic and completely out of line with the whole tradition of the church. And I think their arguments are very sound. But you can see where it came from. This is not coming from the Catholic bishops. This is Catholic bishops manipulated into voting for that document.
Next one is very, very personal to all of us. Hold back the sword, hold back the sword. Time targeted other barriers that had to fall. Next to papal infallibility, the biggest barrier to Catholic Protestant unity is the humble Jewish girl who gave birth to Jesus of Nazareth. In order to remove obstacles separating Catholics and Protestants, the bishops voted to reject a separate schema on Mary and instead incorporate it into a schema on the church. Because recent popes have warned against excessive devotion to Mary that obscures the uniqueness of Christ, and many Catholic thinkers are earnestly seeking to relate the church's Marian doctrines to biblical theology.
Yeah, so, if you want to get rid of Our Lady and put her aside because you want everyone to recognize the uniqueness of Christ, you've just fallen into Arianism, which is a heresy, because if Christ is unique, then he's not God. Okay? So the only way Christ can be unique is if he's God become an immaculate man, and therefore his mother must be immaculate and she must be unique. If you deny that Our Lady is unique, then you have to say that Christ is not God, that he is, somehow a very holy man, So it's very evil. But since the Masons are sons of the devil, they hate Our Lady most of all because she has been exalted above any possible imaginable greatness that Satan could ever long for, to be the adopted daughter of the eternal Father, the mother of the eternal Son, and the eternal spouse of the Holy Spirit. And she is not God, but she is God's greatest masterpiece and full of humility, which crushes his pride. So much so that you just need to say the name of Our Lady or say the Hail Mary, and you can drive demons lying. They can't stand her name. And that's why Time and Life said, the humble virgin, because they don't want even, Masons can't mention her name in their mouth.
Mm.
So now you know where that came from. Putting Our Lady, instead of having a document just on Our Lady and melding it into the document of the church is not something good. Because it makes it seem like Our Lady is subordinated to the church, and therefore the bishop's going to tell you what to believe about
Yeah.
Our Lady, where Our Lady is really glorified to heaven, and she's a Christ, and the bishops must obey her. Separate document. We've seen after the council, they certainly rebel against her, and that rebellion goes on to our own day.
Yeah.
They had other attack points too, or shall we take them up in our next program?
I think we should take them up in the next program.
Okay, so get ready for realizing how much of the Vatican II is really CIA. Thank you, AJ, for having me on Ordo Militaris Radio TV.
This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.